Welcome to this edition of Security and Compliance Weekly. Today, we're joined by Christopher Bulin, who, among other things, is founder and CEO of a company called Proven PCI. Can you guess what we're talking about today? That's right, PCI. We're actually going to focus today on the state of PCI for what's basically the 99% of companies that don't get the benefit of working with people like myself, a qualified security assessor, QSA. That mostly means small merchants, what we like to call mom and pop shops in the industry vernacular, but SMBs for most of us. For those that deal with these clients, this is going to be familiar problems that we're talking about, and we're hoping to shed light on some of these issues and also hopefully talk about fixes for the problems, which is how do you bring security and compliance to small companies that don't have the infrastructure, the people. They just kind of want to use stuff that's secure and make it all go away. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I hope you are too. So join us as we continue our journey of tearing down silos and building bridges on Security and Compliance Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. And now, it's the show that bridges the requirements of regulations, compliance, and privacy with those of security. Your trusted source for complying with various mandates, building effective programs, and current compliance news. It's time for Security and Compliance Weekly. Some things are best kept secret. You wouldn't send your company's financial data through the mail on a postcard. Then why would you let your employees use insecure collaboration and file share tools to share sensitive business information? Introducing Crossclave, a file sharing and collaboration solution built secure from the ground up. Think Signal, only designed specifically for business and enterprise users. Crossclave uses blockchain technology and end-to-end encryption to deliver a true zero-trust system designed to protect you and your business's most valuable data. So if you need to share sensitive information, SpiderOak's Crossclave is your only choice. Go to securityweekly.com/SpiderOak and get a free account with 5 gigabytes of storage.
Welcome to episode 85 of Security and Compliance Weekly, recorded on August 31st, 2021. I'm your host, Mr. Jeff Mann. Joining me today are my lovely co-hosts, Mr. Scott Lyons, Mr. Josh Marpet, and Ms. Priya Chaudhry. Welcome, everyone. So great to see everyone. I can't believe it's the last day of August. We're 2/3 of the way through 2021, and we're still trying to recover from 2020. But that's another story for another day. I have a quick announcement, and then we'll jump into the conversation. InfoSec World 2021 is proud to announce its keynote lineup for this year's in-person event. Hear from Robert Herjavec. I practiced it today, and I still trip up on the damn name. The Shark Tank. The Shark Tank? Shark Attack guy?
Yeah, Shark Tank.
Yes, that's the Shark Tank guy.
He's going to be the keynote. Also, heads of security from the NFL, TikTok, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Stanford University, and more. Herjavec. Did I get it right?
Hey, you got it right. Too late. You got it right.
Plus,
yeah, you got to roll that J.
Herjavec.
Yes, that's it, right there.
I'm just gonna have the Google voice do it. I'll just dub it the next time.
No. You just need to drink more, and then it'll just naturally slur.
Google's not going to pronounce it right.
We need to talk more about.
If you want to go to InfoSec World, and I know you do, you can save 20% off the World Pass and the main conference registration. All you need to do is go to securityweekly.com/ISW 2021 to register and take advantage of the Security Weekly discount. Whew. Okay. Anyway, enough of that. I can't wait till InfoSec World passes so I don't have to try to pronounce that name anymore. I've been chatting online mostly with today's guests for almost 2 years now. Of course, that's true of everybody since we've been locked down for 2 years. I think he originally reached out to me because we were seeing some of the same issues within our world of PCI when it comes to how small merchants, small and medium-sized businesses are generally treated, neglected, used, abused, chewed up, and spit out. Am I overpainting this, Christopher? Welcome.
No, I think you're painting it right. Small businesses just don't have the resources, and they're kind of forced in a corner of how they have to handle PCI.
Right.
So.
Well, before we jump into the conversation, let's take a few minutes to get to know you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you ended up where you are today, and why you're passionate about trying to help the little guys.
So I've been in the payments industry for about 16 years. I've worked for probably 3 or 4 different ISOs, independent sales organizations, reselling payments. Fell in love with the industry just because of it's always challenging and it's different every day. And you get to problem solve for small businesses, whether it's reducing their fees, streamlining their business, or whatever it is, just fixing a problem. But up until probably about 2 years ago, when you and I literally started chatting, I was walking into a merchant and, he had this huge non-compliance fee. And that's kind of where it started. So I went back to my previous ISO and asked if where the non-compliance fee came from. Like, is it from the processor? Is it from a third party? Where is it from? And on top of that, I saw my residuals spike. And I asked if we were compensated from it. And he said yes. And so my thinking was, if we're in the residual industry long term of our clients, isn't it in my best interest to make sure my client is compliant as opposed to generating revenue from non-compliance? So that's kind of where it led me to where I'm at right now. I left that processor, joined up with another one, started a company called Cyber Payments, which was the first rendition of Proven. And I had to keep explaining what I did for a living. Cybersecurity and payments. I was trying to get the two together under one house. And small businesses just, they're told or taught somewhere along the line to just check a box. We do have support numbers in the payments industry to reach out for support. But again, a lot of those people aren't trained either. And they just tell them, just check a box, check everything yes, and you'll pass. And there's no proof to it. There's no validation. Anybody can check a box, so that's kind of what led me to where I'm at now, as to where in February of this year, we launched Proven PCI, which is a cybersecurity solution geared to help small businesses easily meet compliance related to the protection of the data, but through a lot of automation. Because I believe a lot of it can be handled from the agent side of things, or even from the processor side, at least steering them in the right direction.
Well, before we get too far into it, this would be a good time to ask you what we like to call the hot seat question. You might actually have an interesting take on it, which I'm looking forward to hearing. But we ask all of our guests, basically, because we're a show focused on security and compliance, and it's sometimes a contentious relationship, if there is a relationship. So, simply put, and this is just us getting to know you a little bit, where do you fall on this thing that we like to call the security versus compliance continuum?
So, I've thought about this question a lot since watching or listening to your guests and so forth. And I do believe there's a marriage between the two. You can't have one without the other. But I think I fall more on the compliance side of things, more or less being rules. And that's kind of how I try to do a lot of things, whether it's with CardZen, which is my processor, or with Proven, as to where it's following rules. But at the same point, it's following the rules for the cybersecurity that commingle together, or I guess the marriage of the two. So
right. Interesting perspective. To help our listeners, because not everybody plays in the PCI world I don't even play in the PCI world like you do. We're actually coming at it from kind of different vantage points. But to give people an idea of what we're talking about, guys, if you can put up the graphic. Visa used to, and they haven't even done it in a while. This is the latest one I could find. It goes back to 2015, but they used to publish statistics on how many of their Visa merchant customers were PCI compliant, and they broke it up into the 4 merchant levels. So in my world as a QSA, I primarily have dealt with over the years the level ones, where you can see there's, the number might be double today. I don't know, but still a relatively few number of companies. You get a few more when it comes to level 2 merchants, level 3, and so forth. But then you get level 4, and you get this explosion of, we don't even know how many are out there, but we estimate it to be 5 million, and that's where everybody just kind of shrugs and says, commoditize, automate. QSAs like myself rarely will talk to a level 4 merchant because nobody's making a level 4 merchant talk to a QSA. For them to validate compliance, they're filling out these self-assessment questionnaires, SAQs, which is quite literally a checking the box exercise. That's also true for level 2s and level 3s. But more often these days, thanks to MasterCard, which is another story, more often a level 3 and a level 2 merchant are more likely going to engage a QSA to help them fill out the self-assessment questionnaire, to help guide them. I've actually probably got a half dozen clients right now with my day job that fall into this category of needing assistance filling out the SAQ. They want to make sure they're doing it right. They don't want to simply just check the box. But I share this graphic just to illustrate the fact that 99%, literally, if not more, of companies that are subject to PCI from a merchant perspective alone don't have to talk to the QSA. And the QSA in the ecosystem is the one that's supposed to be the security expert that's giving the guidance, the oversight, the interpretation of how do you meet all the different security requirements that are found in the data security standard. I don't know if you've seen this stat before, Christopher, if you have any particular comments on it, but what are your thoughts? What's your take on this?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of different things in regards to, especially with small businesses, right? And right, you don't use a QSA for them, but they have to self-identify. Now, small business owners, they're tasked with handling their payroll, overhead, everything else from all the employees. They're relying on the payment providers that are selling the merchant account to assist them with it, or they think it's our responsibility. And what happens a lot of times is we agents, for the longest time, we've been mistaught. I don't think we've been educated enough in regards to what PCI is. I mean, I can remember early on when PCI first came out, and they're like, "Oh, it's just a fee. Just don't worry about it." And then it came with the questionnaires, and we were never taught properly from the processor standpoint. And so then it trickles down, right? You get the processor, and then you get the ISO, and nobody's teaching them, and then it goes to the agent, and agent's just like, "I don't know. I'm just gonna tell them to check the box yes." And so we have a major disconnect in regards to communication and fact of what needs to be done. I personally believe that agents, where are the what's the word I'm looking for?
You're sort of the first
liaison,
line of defense.
Yeah, we should be the liaison, the person responsible in regards to making sure that our clients are properly educated, but that means that we need to be properly trained. And processors don't invest in 1099 agents like that. They just say, "Here you go. Here's your Schedule A. Run with it."
Right.
I love the fact that the word in there was moderate. Like, it wasn't even, we have a percentage of how many people are compliant or what percentage of transactions are compliant. We're just going to throw a word in there and hope nobody notices that statistically it's totally useless. Like, they have no clue. I mean, Jeff, what would you think?
Go Christopher first.
I'm sorry.
Well, Josh, you hit it right on the head. They have no clue. They really don't. There's a misconception. There's a lie. There's verbiage on websites that say otherwise. I mean, I'm sure we'll probably get into that, but they don't believe it's their responsibility, and they also don't believe that they're at risk.
Okay,
like,
so
why
what
do I need to do it? Nobody's going to come after me.
True. I got to ask Chris and Jeff, our PCI experts here on the show. What does your gut say about the actual PCI compliance for those level 4s? What do you think? If somebody put a gun to your head and said, what percentage of them are compliant? What would you think?
Are compliant?
Yeah.
Jeff, I'll let you go first.
Coward.
Well, you You could make the argument that there's no such thing as a fully PCI compliant company.
Correct.
You know, certainly anytime there's been a major credit card breach, you know, the headlines are always, well, they weren't compliant at the time of the breach, which also underscores the fact that people don't really understand and aren't educated on what PCI compliance is all about. It's not supposed to mean that you're impervious to attack. It's supposed to mean that you're closing up the holes you know about, and you're watching the ones that you know have to stay there, and you hopefully detect the breach early and minimize the damage. For the small merchants, please, Priya,
jump in and ask a question. I like that you described it sort of like you've seen a mouse in your kitchen. Same thing, you plug up the holes you know about and then look for the ones you think they're going to come in. But for context, for everyone out there who's not a PCI person, and the level 1 through 4 you just showed, can you guys give us an example? I'm in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. I go out into my neighborhood. I use my credit card at the local coffee shop. That's a one-off coffee shop. Versus I use it at the Starbucks, which is an international chain now, versus I use it at some New York chain like Shake Shack. Which of the levels are these? And then the second question, so people can understand, what percentage of people's credit card transactions on a day-to-day basis are going through the different levels?
So, me, Christopher.
I mean, your mom and pop shops are your typical level 4 merchants, and because it's based on volume. But I think I don't know what Shake Shack is, but if you're talking about large franchises or at Starbucks, I'm going to say is probably your level 1 merchant. Shake Shack may be a level 2 if it's a larger franchise, or I don't know if that's a local franchise or anything like that. But my target market to focus on is primarily the level 4 merchants. That's it. They're the small mom and pop, the boutique down the street, the liquor store down the road. They're your neighborhood businesses.
So I think we need to make a big distinction here and say that if you are a business that transmits, processes, or stores any type of credit card data, or you have interactions with credit cards, you fall under PCI at either level 4 or level or 3, 2, or 1. Is that an astute statement?
Almost.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you help frame that?
In the world of PCI, there are two types of organizations which they refer to as entities. There's merchants, and there's effectively everybody else that they categorize as service provider. At least historically, it was a single bucket. A merchant is the one where a payment originates. Somebody's buying something. So somebody's presenting a card either in person or, through a website, through an e-commerce site. They're merchants. You're accepting cards for goods and payment of goods and services. You're a merchant. Any other organization, any other company that's involved in any way, shape, or form in supporting that transaction. It could be web application developers, web hosting sites. Nowadays, it's very often cloud hosting, application developers, payment pages, the internet workings, the hosting providers, the network connectivity, IT groups that support all the systems, fraud companies that look up and keep track of transactions, looking for fraud, evidence of fraud prevention, marketing departments that are collecting all your data to send you the coupons and whatnot, that see the transaction day, see what you're purchasing, and historically also saw your credit card information. And that's often outsourced to a third party. Anybody else fits into this bucket of service provider, and it used to be, and as a qualifying statement, most of the PCI industry sort of falls to what Visa says as far as the rules are. Visa determines the merchant levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. They used to have 2 service providers levels, big and small, essentially. But lately they've changed. In the last couple of years, they acknowledged that there's a lot more companies that are in directly than that payment authorization path, which so companies that Visa could see during a payment transaction, they consider them to be their service providers. So they've sort of put those companies in one bucket, but they understand now that there's all these other companies that fit the definition because they touch the credit card data, they transmit, process, store, or they do something that impacts or could impact the security of that data. They now call those companies third-party agents. It's kind of like a bureaucracy. You change the names and you think like you're making progress. But they've at least acknowledged that there's something, that there's a bucket of all these other companies that impact credit card security because they see credit cards, payment cards, but they're not technically in the line of the payment authorization and settlement process. So they have like 10 or 15 or 20 different categories of third-party agents, and they've tried to qualify them. They've kind of done away with level 1 and 2, and it's just you're a service provider, we see you, you're something else, you're a third-party agent. Everybody is supposed to be following the same set of rules, which is the PCI data security standard. I'll pause. Christopher, you want to jump in?
Can I
jump in
ask
in
a
response
question
to
before Christopher jumps in? Because maybe Christopher can answer
Sure.
this. So
Sure.
is the level determined by the merchant or by the credit card accepting processor that they're using? So, for example, I'm a small law firm, and there's a service called LawPay that's out there that offers small law firms the ability to accept credit card as payment. So is the level of me determined, by the size of my shop or by LawPay and the size of its operations?
From my understanding, it's the level of you as your law firm. So it's based on volume and number of transactions. That's what typically dictates the levels in regards to 1, 2, 3, or 4. LawPay, they would be a service provider, and they would fall into their own category in regards to things. So although they still have to meet PCI compliance, and even though you use them, you still have to meet the requirements of PCI.
Thank you.
So what I'm hearing you saying, Priya, is if you're accepting credit cards as a small law firm, you're more than likely fitting into the bucket of you're a level 4 merchant. Now, what often happens is because you're using a third party, a payment processor that specializes in your type of organization, very often that type of company will go out and, I don't know how many small law firms there are in Manhattan, probably at least a dozen. They'll go out and say to all of them, hey, if you use our application, if you use our website or whatever it is that they're giving to you, we've got you covered. We'll take care of all the PCI responsibility for you because you're acknowledged a small shop. You don't have the infrastructure. You don't have IT and security people. You don't, and based on the limited way that you're accepting payments, you don't really have a need to go through all the rigmarole of all the different requirements. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I'm now like thinking about the next question, which is, does that service provider provide protection for me or for my ultimate client? And sort of what am I representing to the client in terms of the security of their information? And am I vouching for it?
Such a great question, especially since you're a lawyer. They probably, and you've already said who they are, and we should probably dub that out. I don't know. They've probably said
I don't actually use them. They're just okay. I know about them because
they're one of the providers.
They are advertised all the time. Yeah.
Gotcha.
We are not being sponsored by them.
What is likely the case, and Christopher, you can weigh in on your opinion, but from my viewpoint, what's likely the case is, that type of organization signs companies up like yourself, small merchants, and says we've got you covered. But if there is a breach, more than likely the liability still falls on you. You're the merchant that's supposed to be compliant. You're the merchant that's supposed to be demonstrating compliance. You're the merchant that's going to get fined if there are fines levied against you. And they start from the card brands and trickle down. But you're more than likely still on the hook, which as a lawyer, I would ask, how do you feel about that? Companies saying, yeah, we've got you covered, but they don't cover the fallout and the liability.
Yeah, that's interesting. First, I just realized that you guys dub me out sometimes, which I didn't know until this moment.
I don't think we've ever done that.
I don't think
There's the first time for everything.
No, there's a first time for everything.
Second is, this is actually very interesting because all law, as I've said to you guys many times, was created in the Stone Age, right? And no one thought of these concepts when they had the common law on things like property. And if someone gives me their property, so their credit card information is their property, then there's something called a bailor and a bailee, and I take custody of it, and then I have a duty to that person to keep it safe if I have agreed to take it from them, whether I'm a lawyer or anything else. And in this case, because the thing I'm taking from them, I don't actually touch, right, and exists somewhere out in the computer galaxy. Someone gives me their credit card information, ostensibly, right? They're going through the portal, but they think they're giving it to me. I'm now the bailee. I have a duty towards that information and to protect it, and then it goes somewhere else. The interesting thing is, I probably am liable to them just the same way as if they left like a file in my office, that I have a duty to protect it. If there's something that I would assume the next group, let's just call it LawPay, is who I give that property to. It's the same as if I handed a file to somebody else. Then they become the bailee, and then they have a duty towards me. And now the question is, who was negligent? Let's say something goes wrong. You'd have to look at the point where the thing went wrong, where the breach was. And I'm using the term legal breach, but it actually applies for the data breach here. Was I negligent in leaving my computer open and someone came by and touched some buttons or stuck a thumb drive in and downloaded or took a screenshot or something? Or did the breach happen at the next level? So it would be interesting because I can imagine, and this probably has happened already, there are lots of lawsuits where for the ultimate client, the only person they know is me, and that's who they would have the contract with and there's a duty with. And then if there's a breach, I would have the opportunity potentially of making a third-party defendant of the processor who had control of the property. Does that make sense? And also, am I frozen?
Nope, you're fine.
You were
Okay,
from
on my end.
Okay.
Well, in going back a couple of questions, I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that in the terms and conditions of the contract, of whether you're signing up with the software, whether you're signing up with a merchant service provider, or even just your local agent or anything like that, in the terms and conditions, it states that you signing the merchant is still responsible to follow the rules and regulations of PCI DSS. And so that's still, at the end of the day, it's still on the small business merchant. It doesn't matter if they're using a software that says that they're going to, take on some of the risk of PCI. Maybe they're going to meet some of the requirements, probably through 9, or I guess not 9, requirement 8. And they're going to handle some of those requirements. But at the same point, everything else is still going to fall to the merchant. And that's where the terms and conditions, the merchant service provider writes it in. You still have to follow all these rules. So it defaults to the small merchant regardless.
Well, so it's interesting. Do you have a sense of whether the processing companies they must have insurance policies, but whether they have insurance policies that explicitly exclude liability to the end user in some way, or whether the terms and agreements say like you cannot or will not hold us responsible for.
Well, yeah, I think that's the way most of the contracts read, is you're not going to hold the processor responsible for anything. Processors have the upper hand on regards to the entire contract. They listed in the terms and conditions of what the merchant can and cannot do, but most merchants don't read contracts. They sign because of a low rate, because somebody said that, well, handle your PCI, and when we're going to do the same thing as the next person did. But the processors, from my understanding, they pass on they hit merchants with non-compliance fees. And it is to cover some liability in regards to the risk that they're taking on. But at the same point, a lot of these non-compliance fees, they range anywhere between, I've seen $20 up to $125, and then they'll even tack on basis points for non-compliance. And you're looking at a $289 penalty for a small business. Just
Can you explain the basis points? What's a basis point?
A basis point is a fraction of a percentage. It's typically a 1/100th of a percentage. So 1 basis point is 1/100th of a percent. Typically, you'll see merchants at, let's say, I'll take a merchant that I have as a client. We have him at 15 basis points, right? So you have interchange, and then he's at 0.15% over cost. Well, I moved him from a previous provider because they were adding on an additional 10 basis points, which would equal to his volume was another $100 in fees, just because he wasn't because he was non-compliant, or because he didn't do his SAQ.
Well, to put it in simpler terms, I think it's how much the merchant pays for the benefit of using whatever the processor or whatever the point of sale cash register systems are, and it's usually a percent of the transaction, or it's a basis point based on the dollar or the amount of the transaction. Is that correct?
Correct, but a lot of times, and I think that's one of the problems in the industry too, is we provide tools to clients to use, but we don't teach them how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of problems when it comes to small businesses in regards to getting PCI compliant. It's almost impossible.
So you're saying, the role that you've played in the past at these processors and ISOs, you've never gotten any formal training. You're not required to go through any certification in order to be able to speak the language of PCI?
So in order for me, where I started diving into it is I went and got certified as a QIR. And I think that's probably the first step, and that's what a lot of agents and ISOs should mandate from some of their agents. Is if you're going to be doing anything,
QIR stands for
Qualified Integrator and Reseller. And so if you're going to be touching any type of install of equipment, whether it's a standalone terminal, a point of sale system, virtual terminal, anything like that, you need to know what some of the controls are that businesses need to meet. And if you're actually certified as a QIR, you can mark off about 20 of the requirements for PCI DSS as a QIR. Some of the questionnaires ask it, some processors require it, but I've never seen anybody enforce it. 99% of the agents out in the field, they're 1099, and there's no formal training to sell a merchant account, to do an install. It's just plug and play.
So I know we're getting ready to go to break here very shortly, right? And Jeff, I'm going to throw it to you after this. Okay. But when we come back, I'd really like to dive into who is pushing PCI compliance and how that is being seen in the market from the people who are pushing. And there's a recent article about something that happened that I would love to cover that I think is very pertinent to what we're talking about. Jeff?
As you wish, Scott. So yeah, let's take a break and we'll come back. Hopefully we'll answer your questions. I've got a couple sort of scenarios I want to throw at you, Christopher. So we'll be right back.